Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Tammy from Homesteading in the City with Tammy. If you are new here, thanks for stopping by and watching my video. If you've been here from the beginning, I really appreciate you coming by each week and watching the new videos that I put out. If you have not already subscribed, please consider doing so. That does benefit me by you subscribing to my YouTube channel. So today's video, we are going to be doing another knitting video, and it's going to go into a little more detail of the stitches that you can do from the previous stitching that I showed you in the very first video. If you didn't see the first video, I will leave a link in the description below for you to check that one out for new beginner stitches. So if that's something that interests you, stick around. Okay, so in our first video, I taught you how to cast on, purl, knit, cast off. So now if you've been practicing your knitting and you've knitted every row where you knit across here, turn it, and knit back, you are now, the stitching that you are doing is called garter stitch. This is a knit every row, and you get this little rib in between two knit stitches. So you basically get some purl rows in between two knitting rows. And this is how you would do, because just basically knitting every row gives you this really cool garter stitch. This stitch is used for things that you want to lay flat, like a scarf. They use this in sweaters to allow them to lay flat on the edge. A lot of people will do this in around the bottom of a sweater or different things just to let them lay flat, or the side of a sweater. This is one of those stitches that, you know, it just allows it to lay flat. So this is what you would get if you knitted every row back and forth and didn't change anything you did. You would get this garter stitch. So when a pattern calls for a garter stitch, it's basically knitting every row. Okay, so now the next stitch I'm going to show you is going to be a stockinette stitch. So a stockinette stitch is just a little bit different of a stitching. It's basically knitting your knits and purling your purls. Now I showed you in the last video that the V's that you have on the front of your pattern here, on the front here, are your knit stitches, and then on this side is with the little scarf around the front of the stitch there is your purl rows. So to do the stockinette stitch, you're going to knit your knits and purl your purls. This is one of those stitches that is good for socks, hats, sleeves in sweaters, mittens, anything that will curl up, because the longer your piece gets, the curlier your ends get on each side. They'll start rolling into one another. So that's what you use a stockinette stitch for. And when they call for stockinette stitch, it is basically knitting your knit and purling your purls. So we did another row there, and we've got nice knit stitches there. So then when we turn it around, we're all ready with our yarn in the front to purl that. And then you get this little beaded section on the inside of all your purls stitches there. So that is stockinette stitch. And as you can tell, it's starting to curl in a little bit right there, and it curls up on the bottom. So the longer I get, the more this will curl in, and that's why we use this mainly for hats. Stuff that you would wear in the round, you would use it for in the round. Now, we do use this stitch in sweaters and stuff like that, but it usually is followed by a rib on each side, or this is seamed together with another panel. So you would be able to have a rib stitch on the one side to keep it flat and straight from curling in, and then you would stitch this into another panel on the side. But that's what a stockinette stitch looks like. It is basically knitting your knits and purling your pearls. So the next stitch that you can easily do from knowing how to knit and purl is called a seed stitch. And that is basically a knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And then on the back side, you're going to do exactly opposite of what that stitch is asking you to do. So here, I've already done one row. I have my purl, knit, purl, knit. So if it's a purl, I'm going to knit that stitch. So we're going to knit, bring my yarn to the front, purl, yarn in the back to knit, yarn in the front to purl, okay. And that gives you this really cool, you can see that pattern with the little bumps in it. So that gives you your knit, your purls and your knits in between. This is another one that you would use if you want stuff to lay flat. So they use this in sweaters and stuff like that. But this is one of those that does not curl up. So you could use this, you could do a knit purl ribbing where you knit purl, and then do purl knit on your way back through, so that you would have this kind of seed stitch on the side of your ribbing of your sweater or something like that. So this is how you do that. It's just a knit and a purl, but it's doing the exact opposite. So now that I have a knit stitch here, the first stitch that I have would be a purl. So then I would make sure my yarn is in the front and I would purl this and then knit, purl, to get this nice little diagonal offset bumps, basically, because they can go at an angle here and an angle here. So they're just offset for little bumps. You can see that right there. So that is what they call a seed stitch, which is relatively easy. It's just doing, and it's practicing your knitting and your purling, and you would just move your yarn from front to the back, whatever you needed to do. So that's kind of a cool little stitch to do. So when they ask for that in a pattern that they want you to do a seed stitch, it would be basically a knit purl and then do exactly opposite of what it's asking you to do on the other side. So then, I mean, we just purled this and it's telling us to knit it, but we need to purl it. So that is the seed stitch. Okay, so the last stitch that you're able to do with just knowing how to knit and purl is a rib stitching. And a rib stitching is basically knitting and purling along and doing the exact same thing on the reverse side. So most ribs stitching that you do, you use it for the cuff of a sleeve, the cuff of a sock, the cuff of a hat, and also like on the cuff of the mittens that come here. So you would do the ribbing there, and it's stretchy. It allows it to stretch so it doesn't look as big as it is, and it allows it to stretch so that you can, get in and out and it goes back to its normal size. So that's what a ribbing is used for. And most common rib patterns are a 2x2 rib, which is 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls. When you turn it over on the other side, you're going to purl your purls and you're going to knit your knits. That will allow you to have 2 rows of knit stitches coming up and 2 rows of purl stitches. And you can easily see the knit stitches there by the V's, and then the purls with the little scarves around the front of the stitches. So that's just basically, reading your stitches again and doing, oops, knitting the knits and purling the pearls. It's been a while since I've worked with these big needles. They're a little hard. I'm fumbling a little bit. And I don't normally work with shiny needles anymore. I tend to use bamboo. I like the bamboo. The yarn kind of sticks to them a little bit easier than these shiny ones, these metal ones. Okay. So there we go. We have our another row of the rib stitch. Now, a lot of people, when they do the seed stitch, they make the mistake of doing exactly what it's asking you to do. So you purled this one here. In here, you would knit this one. But on a seed stitch, you would have been purling this one. But a lot of people will end up doing what it's telling you to do. So like, oh, I got to knit these and purl. And that's why they end up with a 1x1 ribbing instead of a seed stitch, because they're actually purling the pearls and knitting the knits instead of knitting the pearls and purling the knits. So those are just a couple of the things that you need to know. And it also really helps that you can read your stitches. So you know the two lines like this are the V that it gives you is your knit stitch. And the stitch that has a little scarf around the front of it is your purl stitch. So being able to read your knitting allows you to know what you need to do next in your patterns. And by able to do these 4 stitches allows you to take a pattern and actually try a pattern that you might not normally try, because, oh, I know how to do a rib stitching. It's a 2x2 or a 3x3. I know how to do a garter stitch. I know how to do a stockinette stitch. All those kind of things are ones, names that they say in patterns. And if you don't know what the name is and what the stitch goes to, then it gets confusing, and it's really kind of intimidating to start doing a pattern when you don't know how to do the stitches that they're telling you to stitch. Now, some places will just give you the pattern and say to do a knit 2, purl 2. Instead of saying doing a rib stitch, they will just give you the directions and say knit 2, purl 2, and then they'll give you the asterisks to knit 2, purl 2 to the end of the row between the asterisks. So you know that you knit purl 2, purl all the way to the end. And then when you turn it around and start the second row, sometimes they tell you to knit that next row. Sometimes they tell you to, do purl 2, knit 2, depending on what it is that you're doing. But then other patterns will tell you to do garter stitch for 5 inches. Well, if you don't know what a garter stitch is, then you don't know what you're doing for 5 inches. Or they'll say do stockinette stitch for 10 inches. Instead of saying, knit your knits and purl your pearls, which is kind of confusing when you're trying to figure it out. But if you don't know what stockinette stitch is, when you're laying it flat, it's knitting your knits and purling your pearls. When you're doing it in a circle, it's just knitting everything. So now that you know how to cast on, knit, purl, cast off, you now can do some other stitches as far as doing a garter stitch, a stockinette stitch, a seed stitch, and a ribbing of 2x2, 3x3, 2x6, 2x4, however the ribbing you want. You know how to do a ribbing for socks or a sweater or the top of a hat, the rib on the hat. There's multiple things that you can do these stitches for. So now that you have that information, you're able to start reading patterns and being able to start other projects that you might be scared to try before you knew how to do these stitches. So I encourage you to pull a pattern out and start and try to knit something that's not just a scarf where it's all knitting, or even just a scarf that is all knitting where you're doing the garter stitch and you're just knitting back and forth to get into that. And then try a ribbing, or try doing all stockinette stitch. Try a couple of other things that you have not done before. This will get you into being able to read your knitting stitches and allow you to know what you need to do. By being able to read your knitting stitches, you're able to know what you've done and where you've left off on projects. So that is all for today. I hope you found this video informative. And if you did, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Hit the thumbs up and the like button. And as always, I will see you on the next one. Bye.